Good day. Today we are going to do a little bit of a very basic skill which everyone needs at some point in their lives, and that is to do a very basic cake icing. Now this is actually quite a large cake, so we're going to do it in stages. The rule of thumb is as follows. Fill the cake, build the layers, then ice the sides, then ice the top. Then smooth the whole thing down and decorate it and make it pretty. Today we are just going to deal with the icing of the cake. So that's the first layer of filling. We're now going to put the top on the middle layer on the cake, and notice that those are my wife's hands, Julie. She does this far better and far more efficiently than what I do. Yeah, I don't have red painted nails like that. So she's going to actually be doing this for us. Now you can see that she's starting to ice the sides of the cake. The reason she's doing that at this point is because of the height of the cake. It just makes it a little bit tougher to actually ice the sides when the cake is 3 layers high. So you put the middle layer on, you then put a layer of icing on the sides, and then you put the top layer on, and then you finish it off like you normally would. As I say, the rule of thumb for icing a cake is ice the sides first, and then the top, and then smooth the whole thing down. Now the icing I'm using today is an industrial buttercreme. It's basically butter icing, but it's not. The upshot of this is it doesn't collect cake crumbs. If you're using handmade butter icing and you're finding that the cake is actually collecting crumbs, then what we recommend you do is make a very liquid butter icing and very thinly spread it over the cake. Pop it into the fridge. The butter and the icing will then adhere the breadcrumbs to the cake, and then you can ice it like this. Now it's a very soft backwards and forwards motion, and at some point you've got to decide that this is as good as my cake is going to get, and you're going to stop icing it. It is impossible to get it perfect unless you have industrial turntables and those sorts of things, and it's the only thing you've ever done for the last 10 years is to ice perfect cakes. Now Julie prefers 2 or 3 different spatulas to do the job with. The one you see now is an offset spatula. There's a little crook in it, which means it's very easy to get it flat. And then she has a smaller version of that too, especially for the final smoothing work and for spreading the icing around the sides of the cake. Okay, the easiest way to do it is actually to turn the cake. If you've got an old turntable with a bearing in it, it makes it a lot easier. A lot of the newer plastic ones can't support a cake of this size. Now this is only 2/3 of this cake. It's going to go one more layer up. You can see it there in the back corner. So when this cake is done, it's actually going to be very heavy. Now note the backwards and forwards, and she uses the little spatula to actually stick the icing on. Okay. Smooth it around, make sure that there are no holes. This doesn't have to be perfect at this point, because we're still going to do another layer of cake and then lots more icing on top of that. See how she turns the cake? Okay, smooth the icing, make sure you get most of the holes filled. Remember, we're going to come back and smooth this off later. Okay, now we're going to put the next layer of filling on. There you go. And on goes the last layer of cake. You'll see the cake is now a lot, the circumference of the cake, or the diameter of the cake, is a lot narrower than what the diameter of the icing is. So now we're going to ice the sides again, and then we're going to do the top. Okay, and you can use, I've seen people do this with a butter knife. So you don't need to have all this complicated equipment to do this job with. So we're going to finish off icing the sides. We're then going to ice the top. Very important that you do this do it in that order, because if you try and do the top first and then the sides, you'll drive yourself insane. Okay, so the sides of the cake are iced, and yeah, we dropped a little bit of icing on the top of the cake, hence the bit of icing on the top of the cake. There we go. The icing at this point doesn't have to be because we are going to go back and smooth this all out with a very long straight edge palette knife. You can put a whole bunch of icing onto the cake, onto the top of the cake, and then you're going to proceed to smooth it flat. You can use a rubber spatula for this, but my personal preference is for the metal ones. And now what we're doing is we're actually smoothing down the sides of the cake. It is virtually impossible to get them 100% perfect. So at some point you just decide, well, that's as good as it gets. And that's where you're going to leave it. The one thing that you must remember to do is to clean the edge of the board or the plate that you have the cake standing on. Okay, now this cake is going to get another layer of icing over it later, just to make it the same size as the board. You can add more icing if you find that the top of the cake is not level, and you don't have to get the engineer's pencil out to make sure that it's perfectly smooth either. You could just smooth it off as well as you can. Okay. Now this is what the basic cake looks like once it's been cleaned, and we're then going to place a whole bunch of decoration on it, which I'll show you in another episode. So that's your basic cake decorating. I hope you enjoy.